right. Hello, everybody. Are you guys having fun? We're going to have a lot of fun. Right? All right. First of all, I want to tell you a little about myself. I am, by education, a political scientist. By profession, I'm a software engineer. Don't ask me how that happened, but it did. I love to learn. I always have. I imagine you guys are probably the same. And I love to go hiking, canoeing, and camping, especially with my beautiful American Eskimo. I love this dog. This dog is amazing. He is attentive. He listens to me, follows me around, does what I ask him to do. He can even do tricks. It's pretty awesome. You know, come to think of it, I kind of wish young people were a lot like my dog. I've got 3 young adult children myself, so I know what I'm talking about here. Have you guys noticed that young people these days, they are rude? They don't pay attention. They got their nose in their phone all the time, right? Have you ever noticed this, right? As young people, I'm sure you've seen it, right? All right. They just don't pay attention to what's going on in the world. I just, come to think of it, they kind of are like my dog because they're waiting for every meal, right? They sit around asking for treats. And if you don't jump up right away when they ask for something, they bark, right? So, but basically, let's be serious, okay? We're all from South Dakota. We all kind of think alike. So we know that today's young people are just inconsiderate. They don't pay attention to what's going on in the world. They don't care what's going on in the world. They don't want to learn anything new. And they just seem to not want to be engaged in what's going on. It's really sad if you think about it, the way young people are today. So now, before you boo me off the stage, what just happened? You just experienced firsthand bias. And I'm sure that you've all experienced this before, maybe just not as blatantly as me saying it right in front of you. But bias is the tendency to have a perspective that you may not even realize is bias. In fact, a lot of people's bias is so ingrained, they don't even realize that they're doing it at the time. And not only do they not realize that they're doing it, but to them it's true. So young people stink, right? I know it's true because I have 3 young adults and I've seen it firsthand. So that means all you folks are the same. You all are stinky young people who don't care about the world. So let's just talk about this bias for a minute, shall we? What is it really? Well, I mentioned before that it's kind of an ingrained process. It comes from your growing up, how your family members treated you, the friends you had when you were in school, whether you were bullied, whether you weren't bullied. It depends on a lot of different factors. But as you're growing up, it can become so ingrained that you don't even realize that you're doing it. So why does this matter? Well, first of all, let's just talk about some historic biased incidences, I guess you could call it. In the 1600s, there was a group called the Giddy Multitude. And basically what they were is they were a lower class of society. They were farmers. They didn't like their lot in life, and they were starting to wonder if maybe they shouldn't do something about it. So now, if you're a southern plantation owner, how do you handle a near riot or rebellion in the lower classes? There's clearly more of them than there are of you. So what do you do to contain it? Well, one idea is to bring over a bunch of people from another country nobody's heard of, who look different and talk different, and then you introduce them to society and you say, you see, these people are different than you, therefore they deserve whatever they get, because they're not worth it. They're not real people. They don't look like you. They don't talk like you. They don't act like you. So now what you've done is introduced a systemic bias that even to this day, most people believe is still the root of a lot of our problems. This one probably doesn't need a lot of explanation. I'm sure you recognize what we've got going on here. So you take a society that's already really in a bad place, economically and politically, You add an extremist leader who believes there should be one race superior. You subtract free press, and you add billions of propaganda messages all across the world. And what you end up with is millions of innocent lives dying because of one man's belief in a systemic bias. Now, this goes for us today as well. If you think about what's going on in media and in the press, they've always had a lot of power, if you will, to influence how we think and how we feel about things. But today we've got social media, and it spreads like wildfire, right? So think about recent events. If you've probably heard that the Russians are being accused of having tried to influence our thoughts and feelings with propaganda, with social media advertising that didn't say one thing or another, but was almost worse. It said both sides of the story because it was trying to induce, it was trying to get us to fight with one another. So it was implementing stories that were outrageous and outlandish, but for someone with a systemic bias, seemed pretty reasonable. But now you got people on both sides thinking that these extreme perspectives are real, and you could end up with a real problem, couldn't you? So what can we do to eliminate bias? Clearly, I'm really good at insulting young people in front of a room full of college students. But what can we do about it, right? I mean, it seems like we're all smart. We should be able to think of a way, figure out a way to eliminate this bias. Well, the reality is there is no way to eliminate bias. If you're human, you have bias. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, bias is our brain's way of shortcutting so that we can protect ourselves. So I'll give you an example. Remember when you were a toddler? Well, you may or may not. I don't know. It was not as long for you guys as it was for me. Remember when you were a toddler and you saw the pretty red burner, right? And you walked up to it and you're like, what is this? It's so pretty. Yeah, it didn't take you long to realize it wasn't so pretty, right? So now your brain has created this shortcut. Pretty red burner means don't touch. Don't do it. All right? That's a bias. We're not going to touch anything that looks hot. That's something that's meant to protect us, to protect ourselves. So what we have is a situation in which our brain thinks that these biases, these perspectives are meant to protect us. So it becomes even more difficult to get over them. So now that I've given you all that gloom and doom, what can we do? What can we do? Well, what we can do is we're going to learn a new superpower. You guys like that idea? Yeah? Oh, come on. Yes, we're going to learn a new superpower. And this superpower is going to give you the tool you need to be able to help yourself bring down that bias, because everybody's got it. I mean, you talk to anybody, and oh gosh, those darn red dogs, they're so annoying. Well, do you know any red dogs? No. Well, how do you know they're annoying? I know it, right? Everybody's got bias, okay? So we're going to use this tool to bring down our own bias, and we're also going to use it to change the world a little at a time. So it's very, very easy. 4 simple steps, all right? First of all, and I'm just going to tell you what the steps are, and then we'll start. We're going to envision a situation that is really, really upsets you. Second step, we're going to say, okay, how angry am I? Third step, we're going to change that perspective. And fourth step, we're going to see, well, did my perspective change and how much? Sounds easy, right? You guys ready? Are you with me? Okay. First thing I want you to do, if you have to close your eyes, fine. But I want you to imagine a time, something that's recent if you can. Maybe me being up here being all nasty to young people. You could use that. I want to imagine a time where you were so angry that you were like, my gasket's going to blow. I just can't believe it. Maybe you had a fight with your roommate. Maybe you had a fight with your parents or your siblings, or your teacher got up here and said something you didn't like. I don't know if they're probably in the room, so I got to be careful. So Anything that just angered you to that point where you were not sure how you could ever imagine that situation in any different way. All right, now I want to say though, there's a lot of traumatic events that people have had in their lives, all right, a lot of them. And if it's a traumatic event that it's taken you months to get over, or that you never want to think about again, don't do this now. Don't do it now, all right? This is not the time for that kind of event. But it is an event that angers you a lot, all right? So does everybody have that event in their mind? Okay? Now what I want you to imagine is that this event was video recorded. You didn't know it. And right now you can see it on a television screen. It's right in front of you. Imagine one of the old kinds with the frame around. You guys are kind of young, but I'm sure you've seen pictures with the frame around the television. So this event is rolling in front of you, in front of your mind. Now, you guys probably won't remember this, but in my day, there were little knobs you had to turn. You actually had to get up and go over to the TV, turn the knob. Yeah, you guys don't remember. Okay, but just imagine that there is a knob, like a radio knob. Well, that's usually iPad, but you know, a radio knob on this frame, okay? Now, with this image in your mind, if it is in color, I want you to see yourself turning that knob down just a little bit so that the color of the image turns black and white. If you're already seeing it in black and white, I want you, when the knob turns, to kind of make it fuzzy, like kind of noir and mystical, all right? Just turn that knob a little bit. Now, a lot of people also will have things right up in their face. They're like the motion, and you see hands waving, and you see people going like this, and blah. If that's what's going on, when you turn that knob, I want you to pretend that you're going to view this image from a telescope or a binocular. You can still see it. I don't want you to go too far where you can't see it, but you can still see that image. But now it's much further away. All right? Now, the next step is that if you're hearing voices, and you're hearing people talking, and you're hearing chaos in the background, when you turn that knob, I want you to imagine that voice, those voices getting really, really soft. You can still hear it, but you can't hear it very well. Okay? Now, for some people, there are persons in our lives that are so ingrained that even if we just still see their mouth going like this, we can hear it, even if we can't hear their voice. So if that's what's going on for you, then every time you see the mouth move, I want you to pretend it's a little Mickey Mouse voice, and everybody's talking in a Mickey Mouse voice, like this. Okay? Now, thinking about how angry you were when we first started this exercise, right? How much better do you feel now? No response. It must have been a total bust. Did it help? Did it help? Okay? So if that helped you, imagine now what you can do with this tool to help yourself and to help others. So you hear somebody talking to someone in a very nasty way, and our first instinct is to come to their defense and to get embroiled in this discussion that probably isn't going to go anywhere. But instead, if we can step back and see our perspective in a different way, if we can see the image further away and we can turn down that volume, it's going to be less anxiety-ridden, right? And it's going to allow us to be able to see things from a rational perspective. And now we can say, wait a minute, anger is getting the best of this conversation. What are we going to do? Are we going to stop right now and walk away and talk about it later? Or how are we going to handle this, right? The other thing you can do is you can practice on yourself. If you see that you have a bias, if you recognize it, now that you know it's out there and that you're going to have it, you will see it, believe me. It'll pop up. When that happens, do this technique on your own, over and over and over until it's so ingrained you don't even have to think about it anymore. And the next thing that you can do is teach everybody. So if everyone in this room now has their superpower, and you tell one other person, your roommates, your family members, friends from home, you tell one more person, and now we have twice as many people who can have a better perspective because they have the tools to know how to do that, right? So one person at a time, you can each change the world and make it a better place. So go forth and use your superpower. Thank you very much.